Hello and welcome to a special edition of Gulf Business Talks. The global luxury retail industry is in a state of flux. The luxury watch industry specifically has been drastically impacted by the crisis, with the Swiss watch exports dropping more than 60% between April to June. However, there are signs of a gradual recovery. With me here to discuss the luxury watch retail industry is Mohammed Abdulmagied Seddiqi, Chief Commercial Officer at Seddiqi Holding. Ahmed Seddiqi Sons has been a leading watch retailer here in the region for the last 7 decades. Today, it is not only one of the biggest luxury watch retailers in the Middle East, but among the biggest in the world. Mr. Mohammed Abdulmagied Seddiqi, welcome to Gulf Business Talks.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for having me.
Let me begin by asking you, we're nearly 6 months into the COVID-19 crisis. Give us a sense of the scale of the impact that this crisis has had on the luxury watch retail business here in the UAE.
Well, the impact wasn't only on the luxury watches. It was, I think, more or less generally on everything. The whole world was paralyzed during this pandemic. But we have to look at it in the positive way. It gathered people together. It opened the minds of people. It gave us opportunities for new ways of interacting in business. We started having deliveries, for example. So me or us at Seddiqi, Ahmed Seddiqi and Sons, we looked at the crisis of the COVID-19 as a positive reaction. Obviously, we are very sad for what happened to the world and how it affected the lives of many people. But in terms of business, we saw it in a very positive way because it opened our eyes in new opportunities and new ways in interacting with our end consumers. I was having a talk this morning actually with a friend of mine and explaining that we are in a pandemic for the past few months and we were paralyzed like any other businesses worldwide, and the biggest businesses were obviously pharmaceutical businesses, supermarkets, because everyone had to eat. But looking at it in a positive way is that it opened a new opportunity, and it wasn't a war situation. Everyone was sitting in the comfort of his house, obviously with the restriction of not going out or anything, but people were safe. That I can say. If they were taking the precautions, they were safe. So the reaction now, after the lockdown, we see now that the malls have opened in Dubai and things are getting more or less back to normal. We see that consumers are ready to spend and buy things because the saving has increased during the lockdown and people stopped spending. Okay, there were some people who were spending online, purchasing online and everything, which we also started during the lockdown, and it helped us explore something new as an online delivery, e-boutique kind of system, where we interacted more and more with our consumers, our friends, our retail buyers, and we gave them the opportunity to be in touch with us and to discover what is coming. The funny thing is that we are celebrating our 70th anniversary 2020. Unfortunately, it's not the right year, but it had to happen. So we have launched a watch from MBNF in collaboration with Moser just 2 months ago. And the funny thing is that knowing that we are facing a pandemic, and we did a limited series of only 15 watches exclusively for the UAE, all 15 were sold before we received the watches. So we can see that the reaction or the hunger for luxury watches is still there. People were obviously a bit scared during the lockdown just to make sure that things were going back in track. And now that things are back in track, we recently launched a new watch from Audemars Piguet, and we've been just having fights on how to allocate them and who to allocate them to, because it's a challenge for us. So we see that, as you mentioned, the luxury watch industry has been affected worldwide. Not because the people didn't want watches, it's because the factories were shut down for their the well-being of their employees and the staff and the watchmakers, and considering the whole crisis worldwide. So it was more of a humanitarian cause of drop rather than a global crisis on the luxury industry. I wouldn't mention only watches, but generally luxury.
Right. And it's interesting you mentioned that because the Federation of the Swiss watch industry said that the UAE still ranks as the 8th biggest market for Swiss watch exports from January to June, ahead of markets like France and South Korea. Surely the UAE is still doing better than many global markets when it comes to the Swiss watch industry and their sales here in the region.
Us at Ahmed Seddiqi and Sons, when this crisis started and the lockdown started in Dubai, we took the risk of still ordering from the companies that were still supplying watches during the lockdown. And the reason for us that we believe that the pandemic is a short to mid-term situation and things will get slowly back to normal. So we wanted to be ready when things get back to normal. So we more or less predicted what will happen. We predicted the future and we started ordering pieces so that once things were back to normal, we were ready and we have the required pieces for our clients readily available. So that is one of the reasons why us at Ahmed Seddiqi and Sons were still ordering during the lockdown from the companies that were still supplying.
And you mentioned, there are sometimes crazy fights to get limited editions. Now, limited editions are always a hotly contested topic. Let's say the Steel Nautilus or the Daytonas, editions from AP. But as a retailer, how do you determine who gets it, who gets onto that list? Because obviously it's about managing relationships. And let's face it, sometimes it's even managing egos. And yet you need to sort of satisfy and keep that client base without upsetting them. How do you determine who gets onto a list and who doesn't?
I don't know if you attended the Dubai Watch Week last year.
Yes.
We had which how to make it to the waiting list. So very clear that we as a company and as official retailers for many of the brands that you mentioned, we have to be fair to our clients. So we are following the rule of as long as you are a client, you are on the waiting list. So today we have, with the great exposure of most of the brands on the social media, the demand has increased for specific models from each brand, and people have been trying to source these pieces without understanding the history of the brand or the profile of these brands, and they're just looking at what is trending. Our job as retailers is to educate the clients, and one of the biggest platforms that we have and which we are very proud of is the Dubai Watch Week. It is a platform to educate people about watches and explain what is a watch, why is a watch expensive, and all of this. So it is a big challenge for us to control who to give and who not to give, but we always follow the trend of the client comes first, the regular clients at Ahmed Seddiqi and Sons. So if a client comes, for example, just as an example, I won't mention the Nautilus or the Daytona, let's say a Royal Oak from Audemars Piguet, we look at the purchase history of the client at Audemars Piguet and at Ahmed Seddiqi and Sons, and accordingly he will be or she will be put on the waiting list to purchase the watch. We give the priority based on the first come first serve. So if a person came today and his name is the number one on the list and he has a purchase history, he will be given the priority before the second and the third. So we are really following up a very strict waiting list, and we are being very fair with the clients who have no purchase history or who are purchasing normally from abroad. We tell them, and we are very clear and blunt about it, that we give priority to our clients who are loyal to Ahmed Seddiqi and Sons, and they get the priority in getting these pieces. So if you are a client, it will be our honor to give you a watch. If not, we are here to support you, to make you one of our clients by giving you the best service, and then we can have you on the waiting list. So we try, as you said, again, it's something that is not controlled 100% by us, because it depends also on the availability and the deliveries from the factories. So clients, again, the Dubai Watch Week gave this platform of explaining how watches are made and how long does it take for them to deliver these watches. And that's why it is difficult, and it's always limited in supply from our side to deliver watches to everyone, to satisfy everyone.
Right. And it's interesting you mentioned the watch fairs, Dubai Watch Week, in fact. The traditional watch fairs, as we know, at Baselworld, for example, we've seen Patek, Rolex, Chopard saying, listen, we're going away from this. We're going to do our own thing in Geneva next year. We've seen Watches and Wonders, who says next month in September, they're going to have an on-ground event in Shanghai. The entire model of the traditional watch fair, as we know it, Baselworld, SIHH, and Dubai Watch Week, of course, being a major part of them as well, has now turned upside down. What are your thoughts on this entire churn within the traditional watch industry shows? As we know it, I know you've been attending it for the last 2 decades, in fact.
Fairs are more or less, it's a ground for communicating with the suppliers, the factories, more than placing orders. It's been, and especially in the past 5 or 6 years, it's been I would say a playground for the industry decision makers to meet the suppliers and to mingle more than placing orders. It was more of a platform for promoting the brands worldwide through the social media and everything. So looking at what is happening now, as we have everything online, and now with the Zoom and the Teams calls and everything has become easier. And there is the Geneva days that's happening end of this month, and we already see that a lot of the brands that are exhibiting over there, and knowing that we cannot go over there to be part of the exhibition, they have been contacting us to have Zoom calls to show us the novelties. And some of them have brought the novelties to Dubai to show us. We had a meeting yesterday with one of the brands, and they're showing us 1 month prior to the exhibition to show us what is new, and we can place the orders. So the need of exhibitions to showcase the novelties, I think, is an old fashion. It will more and more disappear. It will be more of an exhibition for end consumers to showcase what is coming new. On the other hand, Dubai Watch Week, since day one that we started, it has always been a platform to educate clients, and it was the only non-commercial exhibition within the watch industry. The focus was only on talks. Yes, we had an exhibition where we were showcasing the watches, but I'm sure you're aware, we were not invoicing a single watch over there. It was only for displaying purpose and to educate people about the watch industry, with talks, with the sessions that we have, with the creative hub. So the approach that our marketing team, headed by Ahmed Seddiqi, my cousin, was unbelievable, and we were really proud of it, because it gave a new identity to the watches. Rather than being just another product to be sold, a luxury product, it became a piece of art, and people started learning and understanding more about it. So Dubai Watch Week is a bi-yearly exhibition. So every second year we are having it. Obviously this year we're not having it, so next year we will be having it, and we still believe that it is a strong platform, not only for the region but worldwide. And I'm sure that there will be more brands that will be participating next year as well.
Rolex hasn't released its novelties yet. Patek has been very conservative in what they've released, just a handful of them, including the Calatrava, to celebrate their new extension to their manufacture. With brands holding back on their releases, is this posing a challenge to you as a retailer? who probably are unable to offer the same variety of novelties that you would at this time of the year last year?
No, not necessarily. I wouldn't see it as a threat. I think it's a thing. When we spoke to a few of the brands and asked them about the novelties, and they said they are taking it in a humanitarian way to avoid launching new products at a time where the whole world is suffering. So it made sense, and most of the clients have understood this, and knowing that these brands have a strong history and products that are staying there for generation to generation, people were not worried about this. Even though, as you mentioned, Patek Philippe just launched the 6007 for the inauguration of their factory, which was supposed to be in April 23rd. They just launched it a month ago, and they recently launched 3 more watches that was supposed to most probably be launched in Basel 2020. Rolex, now that things are getting more stable, they have announced that they will be launching few of the novelties by September. Again, if you look at the trend, the launches have come right after the global pandemic, when things are settling down. So again, these brands are not only hungry in selling, but they are also thoughtful and thinking about the feeling of people, because some people suffered, some people lost loved ones during this pandemic. So it wouldn't be right for these brands to launch things where people were suffering. So I think the decision that they took was taken very positively by our clients, by the retailers. Maybe some retailers have suffered because they have been setting a trend, as you mentioned, that on a yearly basis something new comes. But for us, we are all the way with these brands, and we agree with the step that they have taken and the vision that they have taken in terms of being with the world and being strong together, all together, united.
Right. I come to independent watchmaking. These independent watchmakers, let's say Moser & Cie, Global Force, F-Asia, many more, they do not have the same budgets or the same marketing strength compared to the big groups, Richemont, Swatch, LVMH, and yet they need to sustain themselves through this pandemic. Some of them may not even be able to sustain prolonged periods of low sales. Do you think some of the independent brands, a few, might be forced to close as a result of what is happening today?
Well, for us at Ahmed Seddiqi and Sons, and I will not generalize this to the world, we've realized during the lockdown, the demand for independent watches has suddenly increased. So again, a big help from the Dubai Watch Week, a huge support that we've been getting from the independent brands during the lockdown in terms of creating unique pieces for our clients, for our friends, the flexibility in delivering, the flexibility in giving ideas and exploring new ways of targeting our clients. It helped us a lot. I was talking to my son a few weeks ago and telling them that today, Patek Philippe is almost 180 years old. And 180 years ago, it was 2 people that started the brand. And today it's a machine. It's the same thing with Rolex. Today is a foundation, but 100 years ago, 115 years ago, it was found by an individual, one individual. Today, the independent watchmakers are exactly the same story of what happened 100 and 150 and 200 years ago. It's passionate watchmakers with a vision to create pieces that are life-lasting for individuals who appreciate fine watchmaking. Us as retailers, we believe that we have to support these people because today they are independent watchmakers, but 50 years down the line or 70 years down the line, when the next generation comes, our children and grandchildren, they will talk about it and they will say that our previous generation or our grandparents or our parents were the people who supported these brands and worked with them when they were independent, and they created a buzz for this brand and grew this brand in the region. A funny story is in the 70s, my father always told me the story when we got the Audemars Piguet brand. My late grandfather, didn't believe in the brand because a steel watch was selling more expensive than a Rolex Day-Date in gold. And he told him, this is an expensive watch, it wouldn't work. And my father ordered a few pieces for his personal friends and made them buy it just to prove to my grandfather that this brand can work. And today it's one of the strongest brands in the world. So the vision that you can have as a retailer can build a brand within the region and make it stronger. Yes, some brands will suffer. Yes, some brands are suffering, but it's the power of the retailer if they want to sustain these brands and give them the support to keep them running. And for us, we've been doing everything, because at the end of the day, we look at it as a personal and a human relationship with these brands, rather than being in touch with a board or following up with big groups.
With regards to e-commerce, Ahmed Seddiqi Sons has not had an entirely dedicated push on e-commerce until now.
Yes.
Will that change over the course of this pandemic? And also, are brands now telling you, maybe, let's scale down our physical store presence and let's push on digital, or let's push e-commerce now higher than we've ever done, or stronger than we've ever done before?
Well, during the lockdown, us at Ahmed Seddiqi and Sons started, I wouldn't call it an e-commerce, but an e-delivery system, where clients were contacting us and we were delivering watches. A few days ago, we started an Instagram page called the Seddiqi e-boutique, Seddiqi _e-boutique, where we target clients on the stock that we have. And through that, we are using the same platform that we were using during the lockdown, where we are accessing more people through the Instagram account and having the watches delivered. However, I still think that Dubai is still strong on brick and mortar. People would still go to the malls. People would still prefer to have the experience in the showroom when it comes to luxury products, regardless of it being watches or other products. Dubai is a very friendly place for shopping. You see the malls, Dubai Mall of the Emirates, and all the other malls in Dubai. It's a very friendly place, and people enjoy shopping. So yes, e-commerce is an important factor, but I wouldn't say that brands or retailers would 100% depend on that. It will be an extra business, but the malls would still be a very strong part of the business still.
Right. And it's interesting you mentioned the malls and people wanting a brick and mortar experience, because with this pandemic, there is an obvious and maybe a sustained drop in the number of tourists coming into the UAE. But of course, there are over 10 million people here inside the UAE, many of whom have a high disposable income. Does Ahmed Seddiqi & Sons plan to tap that domestic market, and how will they sort of offset the business that would come in from tourists visiting the Emirate and purchasing watches?
The relationship, us as family members, my father, my uncle, my cousins, my brother, my sister, who are all working in the company, we build the brand together to make sure that Ahmed Seddiqi & Sons is approachable by all the local community, being UAE national or expatriates living here. The result is that during the lockdown and now post-lockdown, we see that the reaction of our local community that are living in the UAE, and as you mentioned, the number 10 million people, which is not a small number, is a very satisfying number. And we are proud to say that we are very strong in terms of the local community, in terms of communication, in terms of approaching them, in terms of providing them the best services. Yes, we need the tourists, but we can still survive, and survive very well with our local community here. So I wouldn't say that our business is dependent on the tourist. It is always the cherry on the top. It's always as a business, I would always recommend all my colleagues in the retail industry to focus more and more on the local community, because this is the market that will always stay for you. The tourists will come and go, but your local market, regardless of the nationality, regardless of them being UAE nationals or not, I'm talking about all the people living on our beautiful land. We have to take care of them, because they are the ones who are staying here forever. They are the ones who will always support our businesses. They are the ones who will put their money over here. They are the ones who will give growth to our business. So our focus has always been the local market. And we are proud to say that during the pandemic, as I mentioned at the beginning, that this was something that was a positive thing, that things that we have been working in the past, it showed that it is coming back positively back to us. So
Watchbox, now that is a very interesting joint venture that has recently taken off. In fact, at Dubai Watch Week last year, Watchbox opened its first retail store here in Dubai in partnership with you. Now the Watchbox plays an important role in curbing the grey market, the black market, the second-hand market. It sort of regulates that market, because if there wasn't a platform for second-hand pre-owned watches, they just go on floating. There's duplicates, there's fakes, and a lot of things, undesirable things happening within that sector. Talk to us about this partnership that you now have with Watchbox.
Us at Ahmed Seddiqi and Sons, we have been curating time since 1950. So it is an important factor that we also try to give the best possible service for consumers who purchase watches and want to revamp their collection. We have been studying to enter the second-hand watches since 2006, actually. We were just looking for the right partners and the right way to do it, because we didn't want to be competing in the market in a wrong way by being in the parallel market or the secondary market or the gray market or whatever terms that they use it. We wanted to be the authentic pre-owned watch supplier for the region. The advantage of Watchbox are few, actually. One of them, it's a company that's based in the US and that owns their own inventory. So unlike other platforms where they are just showcasing watches for different people, individuals, may it be, or companies, here Watchbox owns the pieces. Number two, each watch that is coming to Watchbox, bought by Watchbox, or will be sold to a client from Watchbox, goes through a full service. Now that it's in the Middle East, we service all the watches from our Swiss watch service here in Dubai, which is considered one of the biggest in the region and one of the biggest in the world as well. So all the watches are serviced here and then offered to the clients with an extended 2 years warranty from Watchbox. So that thing itself adds extra credibility to the end consumer who's purchasing a watch that is an authentic watch. Apart from that, we also make sure that watches are not stolen, not reported. So when a consumer buys a watch, he's 100% sure that he's buying a watch that has been sold or traded in from a consumer and is offered to him through Watchbox. We do have two different platforms of Watchbox. We have the online platform, which is obviously how it all started in the US, and we're starting. We have it here as a base here as well in Dubai, and for the region. And we have the first store in the DIFC where we showcase some of the watches, and clients can come, purchase watches, trade watches, discuss about watches, and we do a session every Wednesday on Instagram to explain to people with our fellow clients who are watch lovers to discuss about watches, about how to trade in watches and everything. It is an important platform because today, as any watch lover, they like to change their collection. So instead of them going to places where they can be cheated in terms of prices or given low prices for watches that they have invested in 5-6 years ago or many years ago, This is a platform where it helps them create their collection and understand why these watches are in demand and why not, and give them the best possible price. So it is a very important addition to Ahmed Seddiqi and Sons to have Watchbox as partners for the region and to help accommodate the requirements of our collectors in the region.
What are some of the lessons, or perhaps some of the most important lessons that you have learned that other watch retailers should remember as a result of this pandemic?
Human touch. You know, at the end of the day, what matters is the human relationship between people. All companies are always looking for numbers. Numbers will come as long as there is this human interaction and respect, mutual respect between people, individuals, companies. I think business will sustain and stay forever. It's all a matter of relationship. It's all a matter of respect. And this is what the vision of my grandfather, late grandfather, when he created the company, it was always the points that he was talking about was trust and human touch. We have to have respect. We have to know each other. We have to respect each other. We have to support each other in good times and bad times. So now that we were facing a difficult time, we had to stand for each other. And we realized that most of the brands during this pandemic, when we approached them to support us in some things, very few of them said no. Most, or I would say maybe 95% of the brands, when we approached them to support us in terms of ordering, in terms of payments, in terms of deliveries, in terms of holding deliveries, all of this, most of the brands, because of the relationship that we have since 70 years, or some of them less because we've been working with them since the 70s or the 80s, the relationship and the respect that we have with the brands helped us where we are today and where they are today. So it's an important factor that we keep this human touch always and not forget about this point always.
Right. And are brands still willing to, and talking to you to say, listen, let's expand our retail footprint 2020, 2021? Are they already in discussions for that?
We are already in discussions with many brands. During the pandemic 2020, we didn't have any plans of opening stores. I think we have one store that will be hopefully opening by end of this year, which we didn't cancel because we believe that Dubai is always on a scale of going up and down. And in 2008, we have witnessed an international crisis which affected the whole world. Today, what we are facing is not a monetary crisis. This was more of a health crisis. Money is still there. People are still doing well. I think most of the health industry have come to hopefully finding a solution to this pandemic and finding the vaccine for this sickness, and things will go back to normal. So us as Ahmed Seddiqi and Sons, we have to try to cope up with the growth of Dubai. Dubai is growing at a pace that is unbelievably fast, and we are proud to be part of the growth of Dubai. But again, we as an individual company, private company, it's difficult to be as fast as Dubai. Dubai is how it is growing, but we try as much as possible to follow the vision of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, and to look at also the vision of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed for the UAE, how they are growing the UAE. Today, the UAE is the #1 country in the world in terms of doing all the tests for the people living in the UAE. This itself is an achievement, and this shows the people living in the UAE and to the world how UAE is taking it serious about the human factor of the people living here, which matters at the end of the day. They closed down the trade center and made it a full-fledged hospital during the lockdown just to cater to all the people who were suffering from the COVID-19. without charging them money, or it was a minimal charge. So which other country will do this for the people living in their country, you know? So for us, it's a stand to be proud of our country, of our rulers, of our leaders who created this comfort zone for the people living here. Again, coming back to the previous point about the human touch and the respect. So our leaders respect the people regardless of the position they are working in, regardless of the nationality they are from. They were treating all people equally, and everyone was being given the importance like everyone else. So this is the difference that UAE has provided to the world, and it proves to the world that UAE is looking at the people in terms of the human touch.
And my last question to you is this going to be a V-shaped recovery, a U-shaped, a W-shaped? What are some of the forecasts that you all determine of when are we going to go back to pre-pandemic levels? Will it be 2021, 22, 23? What are some of the broad forecasts that you all are working through at this moment?
Well, we're taking things step by step. We're taking everything cautiously. We are following very well the guidelines given by the UAE government to us. We are in touch regularly with the Ministry of Health and Prevention to make sure how things are going, how we can support and everything. There are talks now that the second wave is coming in Europe. We hope not. We hope it's just rumors. But we at Ahmed Seddiqi and Sons, we have to first look at the well-being of our employees, our consumers who are visiting us, or we are visiting them through the e-boutique. And we take it step by step to make sure that we are following the guidelines given to avoid any problems that may occur in the future. Things will take time, I still believe, to recover fully and be back to normal. The UAE is already testing few vaccines, which we heard about. We hope things get better by first quarter of 2021, when we will see flights are resuming. Flights are already resuming, but more regularly, and more people will be traveling and feeling more comfortable in traveling. So we cross our fingers and we wait and see what happens.
And on that note, we must end. Mr. Mohammed Abdulmagied Seddiqi, I thank you very much for being on Gulf Business Talks.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
To all our viewers, thank you for joining us. Do follow us on all our social media handles on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And of course, we are at gulfbusiness.com. Thank you very much.